Okay, welcome back Science 30s to our next lesson in Chapter 4. This is 4.4, and today we're going to be talking about heredity. While growing up, you may have heard people say things like this to you. They might have said, "Oh, you have your mother's eyes," or "Oh, you have your dad's smile." And although these might seem a bit odd, like to have your mother's eyes in your eyes, they are actually kind of accurate because all of your cells are made from the DNA that came from either your mom or your dad. All the DNA that you had to have come from your mom or your dad, and that's the instructions to build you. So all of your genes and genetic traits came from either your mom or your dad. Now trying to determine which ones you'll get from your mom, which ones you'll get from your dad, and if you kind of have two competing for each other, which one's going to be shown is kind of tricky to understand, and there's a whole branch of science dedicated to understanding this called heredity, which is what we're going to look at today. Okay, so when a baby is formed, or scientifically an offspring of sexual reproduction is created, we have two parents. We have the male or the dad with a full set of chromosomes, who's got 23 pairs, and then we have a mom or the female with 23 pairs as well. And I put them in different colors as these are homologous chromosomes, as they got each of these from their parents, but we won't go back all the way up the family tree. We're going to start at this level. Now, the mom and the dad are both going to go through meiosis, which is creating sex cells or half DNA cells, also called haploid, and they create four different daughter cells or four different sex cells. For the dad, it would be sperm, and for the mom, it would be four different eggs. Now, they're different because they have that crossing over that we mentioned in the last video for meiosis, but for simplicity here, we're just going to simplify it into either splitting up as a green and a red, or a purple and a yellow. So I'm going to simplify it to looking like this. We've got two different types of sperm and two different types of eggs. Now, this is the sex cells that are going to come together to make the offspring or make the baby. So there's lots of different combinations that we could get. We can see there's kind of four different cells here that could combine. So we could have dad's green mixed with mom's yellow, and we could get an offspring like that. We could have dad's green mixed with mom's purple and an offspring that looks like that. We could have the red and the yellow looking like that. Or lastly, we can have the red and the purple looking like that. So lots of different combinations here, and it looks a little bit messy with all those different arrows. So we simplify this into a grid system called a Punnett Square. And how we're going to use this is on that side, we're going to put one parent. So let's say we put dad and the chromosomes that he has in those two boxes there, the ones that he could give to the child. And then up here we have mom with the two chromosomes that she could give. And then we just look at all the possible combinations. So we could have the yellow combined with the green, that would make that one. We could have the yellow with the red, the purple with the green, or the red with the purple down in this corner. So you just kind of draw a line, one you get from dad and one that you get from mom, and see all the different possible combinations. So these are the four different offspring that could result from these two parents. Now, before we start looking at the likelihood of what traits you're going to get from the mom or the dad, we need to know some terminology. So the first set of terminology we have to know is first starting with a gene. So gene is a section of DNA that's going to code for a trait. That could be for eye color, skin color, hair color, things like this. Things besides color, but those are some good examples. So this means that if we have a section of DNA, the part they're coding for a specific trait like that there is a gene. Okay? Now we talk about that gene kind of in two ways. First way is called a genotype, which is the actual DNA for that trait. So it's the code for making that thing. So for example, this could be ATTCAG. I don't know what that would actually be, but it's just an example of a section of DNA of nitrogen bases that codes for a trait. Maybe that codes for blue eyes. Okay, that section of DNA is the genotype, ATTCAG. That's a genotype. The phenotype, which is our next term, is how that's going to be expressed. So as I mentioned, maybe that genotype codes for blue eyes. Okay, its expression is the phenotype, the actual code is the genotype, and again, a gene is this section of DNA. Okay, next set of things we have to know have to do with homologous chromosomes and alleles. Homologous chromosomes we've mentioned a couple times before. You have 23 chromosome pairs And in that chromosome pair are homologous chromosomes. They code for the same things, but they could be different versions of them. Right? So this whole big chromosome has a lot of different things it's going to give instructions for. Like DNA is going to give instructions for building things. And your other one in the same pair is going to give instructions for the same things, but they might be different. Okay? Now, when we're comparing just that one trait, how one version could be different than another, that's when we use the word allele. So it codes for the same trait or gene, but has a different version. Let's put up some pictures to try and make that a little bit more clear. So these pictures with two chromosomes paired up here is representing a homologous pair. So the green one maybe codes for eyes right there, hair right there, a nose right there, and teeth right there. Now the yellow one's going to do the same thing. It's going to code for the same stuff, but it might code for a little bit different. Okay, so that's a homologous pair, those chromosomes. And again, you have 23 pairs in your body cells. Okay. Now when we focus on a smaller part of that, that's looking at the alleles. So if we look just at the eyes, maybe that green one codes for brown eyes. Okay, that would be an allele. And the other one for eyes, the other allele would be maybe for blue eyes. So just comparing those two genes, we have a brown allele and we have a blue allele. Okay, now moving into heredity and which traits are going to show. We need to know these things. We need to know dominant versus recessive. Dominant means that when it's paired with another allele, so another version of that gene, that one is going to show. It's going to kind of overpower, it's going to dominate the other allele. And recessive is the one that gets kind of dominated or gets kind of masked or hidden. When there's both of these, that one is not going to show. So if I put that example up from previously, if we have this homologous pair and you have a brown from your mom and a blue from your dad, you have genes for both of these. So which one are you going to have? You're going to have blue eyes, you're going to have brown eyes. We have those two alleles. So the one that's going to dominate and is going to show as the dominant, the one that we're not going to see is recessive. So if you have brown eyes, then brown would be the dominant and blue would be the recessive. Okay, lots of terminology. Two more terms that we have to know is homozygous versus heterozygous. Okay, homozygous means that the alleles that you have, okay, in your homologous pair are both the same. So if you had two browns and that was the dominant one, you'd have two dominant alleles. If you had two blues and they were both recessive, you would have a homologous recessive for two blues because you have the same alleles. So both of your alleles are the exact same. That's homozygous. Heterozygous is the opposite, when you have different. So maybe you have one blue and one brown. You have different ones, so that's called heterozygous. Okay, so now we're going to take all that information and put it into a question for trying to determine what the offspring is going to be like between two parents. So it says if a dad is heterozygous and a mom is homozygous and brown, what are the chances the offspring will have blue eyes? In the top here I put, we're going to use that same understanding that brown is dominant and blue would be recessive. So how do we apply this to a Punnett square? Well, it says that dad is heterozygous, so that means that we're going to put different alleles there. Now, how we're going to write them is not by drawing colored in chromosomes, but we're going to represent them with letters. And a capital is going to be the dominant and a lowercase is going to be the recessive. So if he's heterozygous, he has a dominant and a recessive. So I'm putting B's here because it works well for brown and blue, but you can use any letter, just make the capital the dominant and the lowercase the recessive. So he's heterozygous, he's got a dominant and he's got a recessive. Okay, and then the mom says is homozygous brown. So if brown's dominant, I need capital for brown, and homozygous means that it's all the same, so I need two capitals. So I put capital B and capital B there as well. Now just we need to match these up. So I'm first going to start with the B here and the B here. They're all B's, but the capital B and the capital B, and bring them into that first square to see that that would be a possible offspring, that B and that capital B as well. Next I'm going to look over here for this capital B and this capital B could make that offspring. Then I'm going to go down here and say that lowercase b could combine with this uppercase b, and lastly I could have this uppercase b and that lowercase b to form this. So when I look at all of these and it said, what are the chances that the offspring will have blue eyes? I have to see what these genotypes, because that's the genes, right? We're looking at the letters here, what those are going to express as the phenotype. So let's look at this first one, capital B, capital B. That's both genes for brown, so that one's going to be brown. And the next one, same thing. That one's going to be brown. When I look down here, I have a capital B and a lowercase b. That means we have the brown gene and the blue gene. So which one's going to show? The dominant one, which it says at the top, brown is dominant. So that one's going to be brown. This one looks identical, so that one's also going to be brown. So there's no way that these parents could have a blue-eyed offspring. So the chances would be 0%. Let's try one more. This one says, if both parents are heterozygous, what are the chances the kid or the offspring will have blue eyes? Okay, so last time just the dad was heterozygous, now both are heterozygous. So we'll throw those up there, a capital B and a lowercase, capital and a lowercase. Use that same combining method. We have capital and capital to make two capital B's. Then we have capital and lowercase to make capital and lowercase. Same case for the bottom here. We have a lowercase and an uppercase, or a dominant and recessive. But then over here, we have two lowercase or two recessive. So now let's see what those would look like. So both browns, that's going to be brown. Brown and a blue, brown is dominant, so it's going to be brown. Brown and a blue, brown is dominant, so it's going to be brown. But the last one here has two blues, so that one has to be blue. Even though it's recessive, that's all that we have for the genes. It's got two blues, so it's going to be blue eyes. So now looking at all of these different possibilities of the offspring, we see that 1 out of every 4 has blue eyes. So there's a 25% chance that the offspring is going to have blue eyes, 75% chance that it's going to have brown eyes. And that one I find kind of interesting, because if we look at the parents, the dad is going to have brown eyes and the mom is going to have brown eyes, but yet they had a kid that has blue eyes. And that initially probably seems, how could that happen if both the parents had brown eyes? How can they have blue eyes in their offspring or in their child? But we can see that they had a blue gene. It just wasn't shown because they also had the brown. So that's an introduction into heredity. We'll look at more examples with Punnett squares and some more challenging questions in class and in the lifetime, but hopefully that helped you to understand the basics. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next lesson.